Welcome back to my channel. Here are 5 scary stories about things that go bump in the night. And this episode is extra special because we've been getting some really gruesome messages from our subscribers. So let's read them. Story 1, the baby monitor. I was half asleep when the baby monitor crackled. My daughter's voice whispered, "Daddy, he's in my room." I bolted down the hall, but when I opened her door, she was sound asleep. The monitor was still on, then I heard breathing right behind me. I froze. I slowly turned my head and saw the closet door, which we always keep open, was closed. Just before I screamed, the monitor came to life and I heard giggling. Not my daughter's giggle. I sprinted to her, scooped her up and held her close. But the monitor was still on. Then I heard it again, the giggle. Then all of the toys in her room started giggling, and I know they weren't plugged into anything. I ripped the cord out of the wall and threw it across the room. It landed near the rocking horse, and it suddenly started rocking, back and forth, faster and faster. I think I ran out of the house without making a sound because I still don't know how I got outside. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and the front door slammed shut. I pounded on it, but it wouldn't budge. I looked back at the window and the rocking horse was still rocking. I couldn't get back in. I could hear my daughter crying and calling for me, but I couldn't get in. The front door finally unlocked and I rushed inside, scooped up my sleeping daughter, and haven't unplugged the baby monitor since. But the scariest part, I never saw what was in the corner of her room, but I swear it hasn't left. Story 2, the funeral call. Last year, my grandmother passed away. I live a few states over and wasn't able to attend the funeral. I felt terrible. So the night after her funeral, I decided to call my family and see if they could send me a recording of the service. What I didn't expect was the call I received after my family had gone to bed. My phone lit up, displaying Grandma's name on the caller ID. Shaking, I answered the call, and her voice, weak and raspy, whispered, "Check the basement." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I knew there was no way it was actually her, but curiosity got the best of me. So I dialed the number again, hoping to catch her before she hung up. But when I answered, the call displayed unavailable. With a shiver down my spine, I made my way downstairs to the basement, flicked on the light, and froze. There, scattered across the concrete floor, were the pieces of my grandmother's photo, the one that sat on the mantelpiece in our home. I quickly called back the number, but this time it sent a message, "You're next." Story 3, the wrong reflection. A few years ago, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. It was then I realized it wasn't mine. It was smiling when I wasn't. Then it did something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It lifted its hand and pressed against the glass, like it was trying to push through. I stood there frozen, watching it inch closer and closer until its face was mere inches from mine. That's when I broke down and fled the bathroom. I didn't look back, but when someone told me to, I hesitantly crept back in and found that the mirror had cracked, but only from the inside. Since then, strange things have happened in that bathroom. The lights flicker and the water turns cold. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I can still see the edges of the cracks. Story 4, the Hitchhiker. About 20 years ago, I was driving home from work late at night. I was alone. Suddenly, I saw a girl walking barefoot along the side of the road. I rolled down my window and asked if she needed a ride. She nodded silently and climbed into the passenger seat. She was soaking wet, so I turned up the heater and offered her my jacket. Still, she didn't say a word. She just stared out the window. For a while, neither of us spoke until suddenly she vanished. I slammed on the brakes and whipped my head around to find her gone. When I looked back at the road, she was nowhere to be seen. I pulled over to the side of the road and got out. The seat where she was sitting was soaked, but there were muddy footprints leading away from the car. I followed them, but they disappeared after a few steps. I walked back to my car and drove home. That's when I noticed the footprints on my bedroom carpet. They matched the ones in my car perfectly. And that's not the weirdest part. To this day, I have no idea how she got in my car. I never saw her open the door. I also remember thinking how odd it was that I recognized those footprints because I never should have seen them before. Story 5. The old tape. I was cleaning out my attic when I came across a box filled with old videotapes. One of them was dusty and had a handwritten label on it that simply said, "Do and watch." Naturally, being young and stupid, curiosity got the better of me and I played it on my VCR. At first, it was just static, but then I saw a figure sitting in the exact same spot I was in, watching the tape. He looked exactly like me, down to the shirt I was wearing. I stopped the tape and rewound it to show it to my friend, who was visiting at the time. I fast-forwarded to the part where I appeared on the screen and pressed play. This time, however, the person on the screen turned his head and looked directly at me. I instantly pressed stop, and then something terrifying happened. Whatever was on the other side of the screen stepped up behind me and pressed his hand against my shoulder. I dropped the tape, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. I stayed in that attic for hours, too scared to leave. But when I went back to that tape, it showed the exact same scene, except now the figure was standing right where I was sitting. I couldn't bring myself to watch any further, so I taped over the remaining footage with the movie I was watching. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, I was awoken by screams in the middle of the night. I went downstairs to find my little brother sitting on the floor in front of the TV. The screen was filled with static, and the last thing I remembered was that tape. I rewinded it and watched as the figure stepped out of the screen. I hit fast forward and watched in horror as he began to walk towards me. I stopped it and backed away, but he kept coming. I watched in suspense as he approached the TV, reached out and pulled himself free of the screen. I don't want to admit how long I just sat there watching him, but eventually he stopped struggling and the image on the screen faded away, leaving only static. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down I knew it was something else. And the most terrifying part, it's not the last time I saw him, because every time I watch the tape, he gets a little closer. For now, which story was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more scary stories, check out these videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.